Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Even though it is a Thursday, we're going to go with a Fireball Hot Take Friday today because many of us will be celebrating the 4th tomorrow. That's right. American independence. God bless the USA. Jake Lyman is here today. Hello, Jacob.
Hello, Jared. How are you?
Outstanding. So, Jake, I don't know how much you know about Canada, but I'm going to guess it's probably not a lot.
Not a ton. I wouldn't say I know nothing about Canada, but not a ton.
So one thing I have learned, and at one point in time, I would have argued that I knew a lot about Canada when I really didn't know a lot about Canada, but I did know the words 2-0 Canada. And I did know that it was north of the United States. And I knew about all the major cities like everybody else. Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, etc. But obviously in the last year and a half or so, I've learned a lot more about Canada. I have a half Canadian son. And one thing I've learned about the people of Canada is their summer starts later than ours does. And it ends earlier, obviously, because it is colder. But one thing that they do during the summer is they go up to the cottage. You know how you may go out to the beach? You may have a vacation home. You may have your vacation spot, your favorite beach, your favorite country, your favorite, something you go to every year. Jake, do you or your family have a vacation spot?
Yeah, and when I was in middle school, high school, we would always go down to Virginia Beach. That was kind of our cottage if there was something like that.
So that's the cottage. The cottage that I'll be going to at some point this summer is in Muskoka. I don't know much about Muskoka, but that's where the cottage is. And so what happens with the NHL ecosystem is they have the whole season. They started in October with training camp in September, and they have the whole season. And then they have the Stanley Cup final, and then they have the draft, and then they have free agency, and then they have development camp, and then everybody goes off to their cottages. The media goes off to their cottages. The players go off to their cottages. The coaches go off to their cottages. The general managers go off to their cottages, and so on and so forth. So today, what we are going to do on this program, I assume, unless the Predators do something wild during cottage season, is this is going to be the last day that we spend talking about the offseason and the Predators, probably until training camp, because the hockey talk is going to go to the cottage, just like everybody else. So we're going to kind of do a little off-season wrap-up, put it on a bow, etc. And I have got to start with this because I heard this yesterday when I watched back the Barry Trotz press conference from the other day after free agency. And he was asked a question about Brady Martin. And he made a comp on Brady Martin. You know, we always talk about comps. Who does he remind you of as a quarterback? What's the comp? Oh, he reminds me of Troy Aikman. Oh, he reminds me of Kyler Murray, you know, etc. Barry Trotz made a comp on Brady Martin that I heard and my head popped up. Play the cut.
That he's going to bring to camp here. As we sit here on July 1st, how much of an open mind do you have about him coming in and challenging?
I have an open mind. This young man, nothing would surprise me. This guy's he's got tons of confidence. I think he's a guy that pulls you into the fight. Someone was asking me, who do you remind me of? And sometimes I show my age, but he's got the Bobby Clark-ish type of mentality. He's got more skill than you thought. He will hurt you. He'll pull guys into the fight. All those things that that make you, your team better when it matters. And he steps up when it matters. So, he get a chance at training camp to step up and it was funny. He came in and he saw, Mike McCarron walk by and he's like, I got to go against him. Yes, you do. And he goes, no problem. So I think you got to be excited. I think our fan base, you're going to love this kid. I know you are. I would bet my life on it.
Okay. Two things in that. Number one, He bets his life that the fans will love Brady Martin, which is not a surprise considering that he drafted him. But it is a little over the top to say, I bet my life. The only time I ever bet my life on anything would be if I absolutely positively knew something. Every now and then somebody will tell me something that I know is not true when it comes to sports. And I know it's not true because this is my job. So at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, I'm worried about certain things like this. And it's not, oh, they'll win or they'll lose, but it's like, oh, no, I'm certain Johnny Joe has 3 years left on his contract. And I'm like, no, he does not. And I know for a fact he doesn't. No, I think he does. Okay, I bet you $20,000 that he did, because I know he doesn't. Those are the only things I'd say I bet my life on. And so the first thing is he says he'd bet his life on Brady Martin. I'm like, whoa, now. That's a lot. But how about the comparison to Bobby Clark? Jake, do you know who Bobby Clark is?
I can't say that I do.
I wouldn't expect you to know who Bobby Clark is. I wouldn't expect most of our audience in Nashville, Tennessee to know who Bobby Clark is, because the last time Bobby Clark played in the NHL was 1984. I'll be completely honest with you. I knew the name Bobby Clark, and I knew he was on those really good Philadelphia teams that won the Cup, but I didn't know exactly like, oh, what was his... I pulled up his hockey reference page. And the way that they do it at these websites is every kind of award you've won goes right under your name. And Hall of Fame is in a giant gold bar. It's kind of like the military, as far as when a colonel gets up there and he's wearing his uniform, his dress uniform, and he's got all the medals in the little pat, right there at the lapel, or right there at the pocket. He's got all of the patches and everything. It's like, wow, man, this guy, that's the Vietnam War. That's the Afghan War. That's Desert Storm. That's World War II. That's what's going to eventually be World War III. I mean, he's got all the medals. Bobby Clark's hockey reference page. Number 1, Hall of Fame. Number 2, 2-time Cup winner. Number 3, 3-time Hart Trophy winner, i.e., 3-time league MVP. Number 4, this says 4-time All-Star, but then when you look down at his actual thing, he's really an 8-time All-Star. So I don't know if he's a 4-time or an 8-time or a double. I don't really understand. Maybe they didn't have an All-Star game. Maybe it was like a different league at that point. I don't know. But it says he was an All-Star 8 times, and that was in his first 9 seasons. He was part of the NHL's 100th anniversary team, the 100 greatest players, which is of no surprise. And he won the Selke, which is for the best two-way forward. This guy is as legit as they come. And to compare somebody to Bobby Clark. And what's crazy is he wasn't even asked, when you decided to draft Brady Martin, whose game does he remind you of? The guys, the hockey people that do this for a living, they always give us players whenever it comes to comps for draft picks that aren't Connor Bedard. And it's always somebody that I look at and I'm like, ew, that's the guy that you compared him to? Travis Konechny? Trotz goes right to the top. Bobby Clark. That would be like drafting a starting pitcher out of high school and saying, who does he remind you of? And saying, well, he kind of reminds me of Randy Johnson. Or a hitter and saying, he kind of reminds me of Barry Bonds. Or a quarterback and saying, he kind of reminds me of Peyton Manning. So when the general manager of the hockey team, unprompted, compares the kid he drafted 5th overall, who a lot of the gurus did not even see as the 5th overall pick or the 5th best player in this draft, to Bobby Clark, a 3-time MVP, a 2-time Cup-winning Hall of Fame center who won a Selke, I think to myself, that's wild. Like, that's wild. But at the same time, let me say this. If Barry Trotz is going to go all in on Brady Martin, if he is going to sit there and turn down trade offers and pass on Porter Martone and pass on James Higgins, and he's going to take Brady Martin and he's going to bet his life on the player, don't you want him to believe that that's who he's drafting? It's like when it comes to Cam Ward and the Titans. I keep looking at Cam Ward and I keep thinking about what all the gurus said about Cam Ward, which is they kept saying, He's kind of like a Kyler Murray type prospect. He's not an Andrew Luck type prospect. He's not a Trevor Lawrence type prospect. He's not even a Justin Fields or an Anthony Richardson type prospect. He's kind of a Kyler Murray type prospect. And I'm like, trade the pick. Go get Geno Smith. Go get Sam Darnold, start or whatever. But if I did the evaluating of Cam Ward and I was like Louis Riddick and I saw Mahomes on tape, there's nothing you could do that would keep me from picking him. So I'm going to give Barry Trotz credit that if he picked this guy and the fans did not like the pick, even though, and I include myself in this, the fans really probably aren't educated enough to be able to say, oh, how could you take him? That's never stopped us before, by the way. But it deflated the building for everybody that was at the draft party. And yet, when you did the evaluating, when you flew on the Preds dime off to the World Juniors, and you went and you scouted and you saw James Hagens play at the World Juniors, and you saw these guys play in college, and you saw these guys play for their junior teams, and you went to Brampton to go watch Porter Martone, and you did all of this, and you walked out of that and you said, I think I'm looking at Bobby effing Clark, then you should take him. So if that's what Trotz believes, then he made the right call. Is it unfair to compare an 18-year-old who, again, by a lot of people was considered to be the 9th or 10th best player in the draft to a 3-time MVP, 2-time Cup-winning Hall of Famer? Yeah, probably. But that didn't stop Louis Riddick from comparing Cam Ward to Patrick Mahomes. So if you really think he's Bobby Clark, you got to take him. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025 here on the program. And coming up next, speaking of Brady Martin, speaking of him, I do wonder if he's actually going to make the team. And I do wonder if he should make the team. So I did some research today. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game.
my role is not really getting too far into the draft. I trust the process. I've helped run them before. And, you know, it's exciting to see them. I got my eyes on them here the last few days, and I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of guys in hockey and that's still in the scouting world and speak really highly of them. So I think Barry talked about it, that the prototype he is, and you know, you never lose when you have a guy like him.
With a guy like him now, I mean, there is a chance he could be up here sooner than later. Are you a little bit more involved in a pick like that, or at least after the fact? Do you look at him and say, okay, this guy might be in our plans this fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always excited for the player. You hope they all are. They'll kind of dictate if they are or not when they come to camp. And you know, in the summer it's fun to see them. And he has the prototype that you guys talked about, Millie Ice, and he the way he skates and the way he moves and the way he competes, he's going to be a good player for a long time. And he'll dictate when that starts.
That was Andrew Burnett. I have a bone to pick with Robbie Stanley. If the Burnett press conference or Burnett scrum was after the Trotz press conference where Barry Trotz compared Brady Martin to Hall of Famer Bobby Clark, I think he should have said, hey, when you watch Brady Martin, do you see Bobby Clark? I mean, do you see a little bit of a, I kid. So when it comes to Brady Martin, here's the one thing that we got to kind of desensitize ourselves from a little bit is the football mentality that most of us have. It's okay to say that a lot of us that root for the Predators didn't have a hockey team before we started rooting for the Predators. It's okay for somebody like me to say, I went to a game the second season that they were the Preds. They played Detroit in 1999, and I went to the game. And I went to a playoff game in 2008, and I want to say I went to another game at some point, but it wasn't until 2011 that I really got into the Predators. That also happens to be the first time they ever won anything. And so I tell people, like, I really got into the Predators, like I really started caring in 2011, and it's okay. And most of us were football fans before we were hockey fans. And so we see a kid drafted and all the hype in number 5, and we talk about the pick, and we talk about the draft boards, and we break it all down, and we're like, okay, like Brady Martin, this is the answer. But does that mean that he needs to play right away? And Andrew Burnett said what he would have said about anybody. If you had asked him about Mullendijk, if you had asked him about Wood, if you had asked him about any of those guys, he'll say, well, you know, their games will tell us when they're ready, even though we know that's not always true. Matthew Wood played in the NHL last year because that was the way the Predators were going to get him to sign his entry-level contract and leave college. That's why he played on the Predators last year. Ellie Tolvanen did the same thing the year that he came over after dominating in the Olympics. So when it comes to whether or not Brady Martin should play, with an owner in Bill Haslam, who is relatively new to the NHL and certainly has a college sports and NFL background. He's kind of new to the NHL. I could see an owner saying, well, I just picked this kid 5th. I want him out there. But I also know that Bill Haslam is not crazy. And so I did some research today about Brady Martin because I do believe that Brady Martin probably is one of the 4 best centers on the team. We'll get to that in a second. But I did wonder, should he be on this team? Barry Trotz has left it as open-ended as possible by saying, I'm not ruling anything out. Again, we just played the Andrew Burnett cut where he said, you know, he'll tell us when he's ready, i.e. his game will do the talking. I'm also not completely sold that Brady Martin is A, ready for the NHL, or B, would make an impact in the NHL, even if he is a really talented player who's going to be really good. And I started to kind of compare him to other players. Now, I absolutely believe the Preds have already said that they're going to bring him into training camp, and then they get a 9-game tryout period where they could have Brady Martin on the team for 9 games, and then after 9 games say, okay, you're not really ready for the grind of the NHL. You got a little bit of a taste of it, but we're not ready. We're not going to burn a year off your contract. So now you go back to juniors. And if the Global Series games were in October, like they were a couple years ago, instead of November, like they are this coming season, I would have said that would be great to have him go with the team on the international trip and learn about life in the pros and bond with the guys. But again, that's in the middle of the season, so I can't bank on him going on that trip. So I would be interested if he looks like he can handle it in giving him that 9-game tryout period, or even just giving him a couple of games. But I think it's probably more likely than not that Brady Martin should go back to juniors. And that we probably shouldn't expect to see Brady Martin with the NHL team next year. He's not as a prospect Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid. And everybody knows that, including Bill Haslam and including the fans. He's not that can't-miss phenom who's ready to go right away. And while he will be on the fast track, again, Andrew Burnett can say his game will tell us when he's ready. He's on the fast track. He's not going to be on the Joakim Kimmel, go stay down in the minor leagues for 4 years, and you keep getting better, and then we'll bring you up. No. He's going to be on the fast track. But putting him right away with Steven Stamkos is a really tall task to ask of an 18-year-old. And then I look back at other players, other high-end center prospects, and how they did, right away in the NHL at 18, 19 years old. And the truth is, most of these guys start out in the league at 19 or 20. Brady Martin will be 18 this season. I looked at Adam Fantilli, who entered the 2023 draft, the one here at Bridgestone Arena with the 4 top players. I looked at Adam Fantilli, who went number 3. A lot of people thought he was going to be number 2 behind Connor Bedard. He went number 3. And he would have been considered a better prospect than Brady Martin. And in his rookie season, he scored 27 points in 49 games. Leo Carlson, who went number 2 that year, 29 points in 55 games. And again, both of those guys were 19 years old. Brady Martin is only 18 years old. So if Brady Martin plays on the big club, and regardless of the context, that he's an 18-year-old rookie straight off the farm, and I mean literally off the farm, I just don't know if this fan base, which is, again, a fan base that didn't necessarily grow up on the NHL, but grew up on football, would be able to accept 24 points in 62 games. And what's going to happen if he's struggling out of the gate because he's an 18-year-old rookie is Andrew Burnett's going to scratch him the same way he scratches everybody who's not Jonathan Marchessault. And then that football fan base's mentality will say things like, he's a bust, he's not ready, he's not. And at the same time, I keep hearing them talk about how they want to be good this upcoming season. And I keep hearing people like D. Mace tell me that you can't go to Stamkos and you can't go to Marchessault and you can't go to Yossi and Forsberg and say, hey, guys, we're not trying for this season. And then put Brady Martin up there with Stamkos and then have Stamkos get frustrated with an 18-year-old because Stamkos was brought here to win and not be Farmer John's mentor. You ever heard stories about Michael Jordan with the Wizards and Kwame Brown? You can ruin a kid by putting him with a Hall of Famer who pushes him too hard, too fast. So I don't think we're going to see Brady Martin up with the Nashville Predators this year. And history would say, even for the really, really, really good prospects, at 19 and 20, they're still kind of getting their feet wet. And he's 18. That said, if he goes through camp, goes through the preseason, does his thing, and that he is ready, that this Barry Trotz hit this out of the park, he is Bobby Clark. He's the second best center on this team because our other centers aren't very good, which is a possibility. But that he's ready for the grind of an 82-game season, and he's ready to play with a Steven Stamkos at 18 years old. And he's competitive, and he's as mentally tough as Barry Trotz says, and he can handle the expectations of a city that, no matter what you say, is not going to be very patient, then fine. But I think it's probably more likely than not that Brady Martin is going to spend pretty much all next year in juniors. And that's okay. Now, that said, it's not that I expect him like, he better be up with the big club at 19 years old, but just reading the tea leaves of when these guys get thrown in there and they don't play very well right away at 19 years old, they really take their lumps. Even a guy like Jonathan Taves. But reading how these teams put these guys in there, he probably will be up with the big club next season. Not this upcoming season, but the season after that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. And while Barry Trotz says he's open to anything when it comes to Brady Martin, there is one thing he said that I think kind of let the cat out of the bag. So we'll get to that coming up next. And your phones, Fireball Hot Take Friday. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5, 106 through the game.
So your center depth, Ryan O'Reilly, Fedor Svechkov, Eric Halla, Michael McCarron. Those are just the 4 that come to mind.
It's the 4 that we have.
You've said you want to win this year. Do you think that center depth, that lineup is good enough to win this year?
Well, I think, there's different ways to do it. I know that, as I said, I have different experiences. You're just going to have to adjust and have the commitment from the whole group. If you look at it on paper, it's not a deep center group. There's no question. So how do you do that? You got to play. You can win with really good defense. I did that for years. You do that with a team commitment to defense, and you've got to be really, really, really dangerous off the wings. I think we can do that with what we have. Now, at the center ice position, you're going to have to be reliable, and you're going to have to be strong defensively and committed and be on the right side of the pucks. Having your defense, having a little more, I'll say a little more length and size will help that. So it's going to have to be the mentality. It has to be just the buy-in and understand where we're going to be dangerous. I think we're going to be dangerous on the power play. I think we're going to be effective on the penalty kill. And, you have to do it with what you have. I can't produce, a top line centerman this year anyways in free agency. So we still got to build.
There you go. That was Barry Trotz. And while we're talking about Brady Martin making it on the big club, and he says he's open to anything, and he'll be there in camp, and we'll see. I think that Q&A right there kind of let the cat out of the bag that he does not plan on Brady Martin being on the team next year. And the reason why is because the way the question was asked, where Alex Daugherty of the Tennessean went over the 4 guys that on paper it looks like are going to play center. We had Barry on the show. He said he does not want Stamkos playing center next year. I also said to him that I did not want Stamkos playing center next year. So O'Reilly, Fedor Svechkov, Eric Halla, and Michael McCarron. And he's like, yeah, but those are the 4 we got. And he said, I can't produce a center, so we're going to have to make do with what we have. I think kind of let the cat out of the bag. I think kind of said, hey, we don't plan on Brady Martin being on this team. That he is not counting on Brady Martin in the NHL, which once again, I actually think is kind of a good thing. To not count on Brady Martin being on the team this upcoming season. Even though the other day I thought he was going to be there just because they picked him and they think he's Bobby Clark and they want to sell tickets and they want to justify. Again, most of these guys that play in the NHL are 19 years old. He's 18. And even when they are 19, they're not very good. So sticking an 18-year-old next to Stamkos and saying, all right, Bubba, we need you to get out there and go at least play well enough for Steven Stamkos to not want to kill you probably is not a good idea. The guy that I think I would circle and I would say, okay, this is the guy who might actually be something for them that could get into the mix is David Edstrom, who's a former first rounder who was part of the Askarov trade, who is 20 years old. And Trotz has hinted multiple times, you'll see David Edstrom. We want our fans to see the kids come up. And Edstrom's game, when I was reading about his game, according to Scott Wheeler, seems kind of like a Ryan O'Reilly type. Not saying that he's going to be as good as Ryan O'Reilly was when Ryan O'Reilly was at his peak, but, kind of a two-way center, can play on both the power play and the penalty kill, and he's tough, and he's from Sweden. So with the Preds going to Sweden, I could see him, being on the team when they do that, and maybe being a third center if Fedor Svechkov can't do it, and they have to do what I think would be the worst case scenario, which is moving Eric Halla up to the second line. But if this team sucks, and it's like last year where we're all sitting here saying, who the hell can play center for this team? Then I think you're going to see Edstrom, not Martin. 615-737-1025 on a Fireball Hot Take Friday, and our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So I've gotten a couple of these texts into the text line. Gunner says, again, Barry Trotz compared Brady Martin to Bobby Clark, a Hall of Famer who won 3 MVPs, was an 8-time All-Star in his first 9 seasons, won the Cup, and won the Selke. That is a big comparison. But I said, if he looks at him and he sees Bobby Clark, then pick him. Gunner says, no way any Titans general manager would get this grace from you. Another texter. Why is it okay for Trotz to take someone he thinks will be really good, but the Titans are wrong for not trading the pick? Neither of the players were ranked at the top of the draft class. Another texter says, as far as you stress, and this is Steve, who's crazy and part of the Boohoo Ran crew and vowed to leave the show last year, and now he's back. As far as you stretched into delusion to be negative about Rand, you are now equally stretching into delusion to be positive about Trotz. What are you smoking? The Predators don't even have a goalie. I think this is amazing. First and foremost, I did not want them to take Brady Martin. I wanted them to take James Higgins. And I criticized him. I ripped him on Friday. And I ripped him on Monday. And you say things like, no way a Titans general manager would get this kind of grace. Really? After they made the trade for Nick Hague, I said, why does it feel like every trade the Predators have made since the trade deadline, when they dealt Luke Shin as part of a deal to Pittsburgh, and they got a 4th rounder in return, only to have Pittsburgh turn around the next day and deal Luke Shin straight up for a 2nd rounder? Every single trade it feels like they've made has been a ripoff. The Devils should have given you something to take Eric Halla. Adam Vingan's right. You shouldn't have given them something for Eric Halla. They should have given you something for Eric Halla. And even the Nick Hague trade, and I know Trotz loves him, and Elliot Friedman said, hey, teams wanted Nick Hague on the midday show. But even that still kind of feels like a ripoff. You people pretend like I don't ever rip the Predators, and that's not fair to me. But again, I think there's a couple differences here. Number one, the hell do I know about the difference between Brady Martin and James Higgins and Porter Martone and Caleb Desnoyers and Roger McQueen? The only one that I felt strongly about was McQueen, and that's because he had a bad back. That's it. The other guys, all I can go off of is what they tell me. Well, Barry Trotz went and scouted these guys. And when it comes to the Titans and their picks, they're entitled to pick Cam Ward. They are. But it looks like they're setting him up for failure. I've said I hope I'm wrong about Cam Ward. I am a Titan fan. And my son, what's crazy is my son, if he's a sports fan, and I think he would be a sports fan, my son, I think, is going to be a Titans fan, and I think is going to be a Preds fan, because Dad and his grandfather have tickets to the Titans and the Predators. And so he'll probably go to the games, and hopefully he'll like it and whatnot. But he's going to be 9 years old when this UC Saros deal is up. And every time I say that, it depresses me. Every single time. When it comes to the Titans, I hope that my son is able to remember the Cam Ward days the way that a buddy of mine that I used to work with in Louisville, Jason Anderson, who now does middays in Kansas City and is from Kansas City and is a huge Chiefs fan. Remember, we had him on at the Super Bowl, and he talked about the Chiefs dynasty is better than the Patriots dynasty. And you people were like, get this guy off the air, because it was so Chiefs homerific. And I love Jason, but it was Chiefs homerific. All his son knows is Mahomes. And I hope that's what I get with Cam. But I know more about football. And I know what it takes in order to get a Mahomes-type quarterback. And not only do I not think Cam has Mahomes-like ability, because I think Mahomes-like ability is very, very rare, but I also don't see any infrastructure in place for the Titans to get that out of them. To me, that's the difference. Andrew says, this is where Barry Trotz has a fatal flaw. He keeps talking about the centers with words like commitment and reliable. You know what you also need if you're going to be a good center in the NHL? Skill, Andrew says. I do feel like with Trotz and Brunette, they won't say it, but I do think there is a little bit of, hey, things just didn't go our way last year, but we've got the right players, and we've got the right coach, and we've got the right makeup, and we've got the right group, and we've got the right, and you'll see. And that's after the season that we had last year when they never got it on the train tracks, that is a little hard for me to take. 615-737-1025, which is our number on the program. We'll get to more of your phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, something Andy Burnett said that I did kind of notice, and I do think it is the mentality the Predators have that I just mentioned. But also, there's something that I'm willing to do on the show if you want me to do it on the show. And I will ask you about that. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Back here, you mentioned Molendyke. You also mentioned a ton of depth everywhere in front of him.
Yeah.
Where do you see him fitting in and challenging?
We always find you always find ways to get good players on the team. So, with Mully, the biggest challenge, I went up to Rimouski and watched Mully play up there. I mean, there's no question he is dynamic skating. He's going to be a really good player, and he's going to, he's challenged to be on this team the last 2 years. He's going to challenge again, and we'll let everything play out. But there's still things that he's going to have to adjust. You see things in training camp, you see things in exhibition game, then you get to the real season, and all those little things that you can get away with in the exhibition season and early in the year, they start to get magnified. So we just want to make sure that he's prepared. But I don't have any doubts that he's an elite skater. I think he's transports the puck as good as anybody. I think he sees the game very, very well. Now, can he defend and read off the game at the pro level? That's all.
Okay, there you go. That was Barry Trotz, and he was talking about Tanner Molendyk. And so I do have a question before we get to your phones. And by the way, I want to pass this along. Claudia Weber. Jake, do you know Claudia Weber?
Possibly. Is it Pete's wife?
The wife of the very lovely wife.
That's what I
of
thought.
The great Pete Weber. Claudia Weber asked me to let everybody know that the Preds rookie game is Saturday at 10:30 a.m. at the Ford Ice Center. Pete and Jay will be on the radio only call, which of course everyone will be looking forward to at the Ford Ice Center in Bellevue. But that Claudia Weber will be there at the bar upstairs at Draft Picks. Come say hi to Claudia Weber. So I just wanted to share that. Again, the rookie game is on Saturday. I will not be in Nashville, so I will not be at the rookie game, though I am a little fascinated by what goes down on Saturday with these young players. So for years, I used to have a saying when it came to Preds prospects, and it was, do Preds prospects on your own time. That people would talk about, and I can't even remember who the prospects were, but people would talk about this guy or that guy. I mean, Poyle, and Barry does this a little bit too, but David Poyle would just, Milwaukee this and Milwaukee that. And I couldn't give a rat's ass. And then people would tell me about all these Preds prospects, and then they'd come up and they weren't even that good. Fiala had a nice little run there. But, he'd come up and, this wasn't very good. And, this one come up and he wouldn't be very good. And then this one wouldn't come up and then he wouldn't be very. And I was like kind of tired of it. I mean, everybody was, I remember do you guys remember the Jimmy Vesey watch? Jimmy Vesey was at college, and David Poyle and Paul Fenton are flying up to BU, BC, whichever one he played at. And they're like, yeah, we went up there to go cheer Jimmy on, and we hope to sign Jimmy. And then Jimmy Vesey's like, yeah, no, I'm good. No, thank you. And I'm like, we had a Jimmy Vesey watch. We were flight tracking Ellie Tolvanen's flights after Jokerit in the KHL lost. And I was like, all right, do the Preds prospects on your own time. I got a team that just went to the Cup final that's challenging for the President's Trophy. You worry about the prospects and 18-year-old Nova Scotians on your own time, not me. And then the Predators got bad. And then it was kind of like, well, maybe we should worry about prospects. Once they started to trade a bunch of their guys away, like Ekholm, and they got a prospect in Reed Schaefer, and they got the picks, which ended up being Tanner Molendyk in exchange. So this morning, just based off of what I've heard, what I've read, what I know, again, this is not some scouting service, but I have ranked what I think is the consensus ranking of the top 10 prospects in the Predator system, and when I think they should be expected to be up with the big boy team. And I can do the list for you, the top 10 prospects, but I got to know, do people actually want to hear that? Do people actually want to hear that on the radio in Nashville? You see, here's the difference between talk radio and a podcast. A podcast, for the most part, unless it is a personality-driven podcast. So let's say you listen to the Jared Stillman podcast because you care about Jared Stillman, and I could sit there and make fart noises into the microphone and you'd still listen. That's like Call Her Daddy. Alex Cooper could talk about anything and all those people would still listen to it. Joe Rogan, he can interview anybody And all the people that listen to Joe Rogan will still listen to Joe Rogan. But for the most part, a lot of podcasts are very niche. It's like, oh, this is the MLS podcast that MLS people want to hear about MLS. This is the only place you can hear it. So go listen to the podcast. Local talk radio and talk radio in general is not that. Talk radio is to play to the broadest set of the audience. And traditionally, I don't think the broadest set of the audience cares about hockey prospects. And I felt that way for a long time. But now that the local team is bad, I do wonder, do you guys care about the top 10 prospects? So if you care about the prospects, text line is 615-737-1025. We'll do the list. If not, I have a Shedeur Sanders headline that I had to do some research to make sure it wasn't true. And we can do that next as well, because I could not believe this headline. So you tell me what you want. 615-737-1025. In the meantime, let's get to some of your phones as promised. Adam in Portland says, Barry Trotz comparing Brady Martin to Bobby Clark would be like Floyd Reese comparing Andre Woolfolk to Charles Woodson. I simply don't believe him. Well, I mean, Barry wasn't asked who he would compare Brady Martin to. He volunteered that when people ask me what I look at him and I'm like, I think I see some Bobby Clark. Now, Floyd was a very, very different in terms of how he would talk about prospects and what he would publicly say. But when he would talk about a prospect, his comparisons were not, this is what I think this guy will be. His comparisons were more so like what he was seeing now. But I'll give you an example. When Dak Prescott started going, Floyd hated Dak Prescott at the beginning. Didn't like him in college, didn't like him the first year, and he was very anti-Dak, and I was very pro-Dak, and the way that we'd, get into it and things like that. And then finally, when Dak had kind of established himself as a legitimate NFL quarterback, he was like, yeah, I think he's got the potential to be a Donovan McNabb. That's what he said about Dak Prescott. About Josh Allen, the quarterback, he watched him on TV at the combine, and he said his throws reminded him of Ryan Leaf. Not, he's going to be the biggest bust in NFL history, but it reminded him of Ryan Leaf because Josh Allen would make a beautiful throw, and then the next throw would go in the dirt. And he said, I remember standing there watching Ryan Leaf at the combine, and that was the exact same way. So these guys do comps. And the one guy he said he scouted that he was like, pants off, was Andrew Luck, like everybody else. But again, this isn't Andre Woolfolk. This is the 5th pick. And this is the 5th pick that they feel really, really good about. So I just don't think that's totally fair. One texter says, do you think that over the next 3 years, the Titans will be better or the Preds will be better? Well, right now, they both stink. I think the Predators will probably be better. And the only reason I say I think the Predators will probably be better is because I think it's easier to make the playoffs in the NHL. I think the Predators have better players on their team right now than the Titans do compared to the league. And Bill Haslam right now seems to be a more consistent owner, a more stable owner than Amy with some of the decision making choices that she's made over the last couple of years and the this direction, that direction, and all the directions. One texter says, do the prospects. Another said, yes, do the prospects because today is the day before all the Canadians head off to the cottages. That is true. The Canadians will be headed to the cottages, and we will be putting our hockey talk, for the most part, in the cottage because, quite frankly, I'm going to be gone for a little bit, and then when I get back, it'll pretty much be training camp. I mean, once we get to training camp, you guys know how the show works. Another texter says, do the prospects. One texter says, don't care about the prospects. Another texter says, no, please, the prospects. Okay, how do we take this, Jake? Benjamin says, no, please, the prospects. Does that mean no, please do the prospects, or no, please to the prospects?
I assume that he means he wants to hear the prospects. Like, no, don't talk about Shedeur Sanders. Please do the prospects.
One texter says, get back to the NFL. So I'm guessing that would be the Shedeur Sanders take. One texter who's never texted the program before says very much care about the prospects. Another texter, yes, I'm very interested in the prospects. I think the people have spoken, and the texts continue to roll in. Okay. Jared's top 10 prospects and when you should expect them on the team. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game, and let me tell all the fine folks out there. Again, our phone number is 615-737-1025. Let me tell all the fine folks out there, if you just give me 1 second. There we go. That this week's Nationals best deal is Tzatziki's. Craving something fresh and flavorful? Well, Tzatziki's has you covered from juicy chicken kebabs to perfectly grilled salmon. Every bite is bursting with Mediterranean goodness. And don't even get us started on the homemade sauces and dressings. That's right. And by the way, I did this on Monday, and that night I had Tzatziki's because I love Tzatziki's. And so, yes, get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at thegamenational.com/deals. And tune in to 94.9 The Fan tonight for the Sounds as they take on Memphis. Pregame at 6:20. First pitch at 6:35. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenational.com. Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and by Family Leisure. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, and it is a de facto Fireball Hot Take Friday with the holiday tomorrow. So a lot of you have spoken, and I am surprised at how many people are like, we want to hear Jared's top 10 Predators prospects. Let me just be completely honest with everybody out there before we get into the prospects. I cannot wait until this team is good again. And the second this team is good again, prospect talk goes right back in the closet. I mean, it goes there and it goes. You got to listen to Max's official podcast if they get good again, because we'll be talking about the NHL team and things like that. But it is what it is. So without further ado, oh, by the way, I am going to read this text. Dylan says, personally, I would like to hear the Shedeur Sanders headline as well as the prospects. So I'm going to tell you what the headline is. Have you seen this headline, Jake?
I have not. I actually don't know what this is.
Okay, so I saw this in the New York Post, and I had to actually read the article to make sure that this was real. Apparently it is, because it comes from Mary Kay Cabot, who is as tied into the Cleveland Browns as you can be. The headline is, Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson taking rookie Shedeur Sanders under his wing.
I did see that, actually.
I don't even know where to begin with that headline. Okay, Preds prospects, the top 10 Nashville Predators prospects, and when you can expect to see them, we start at the top, which I think is of no surprise to anybody. Brady Martin, and I put his ETA at 2026. And the expectation is Brady Martin will be a first-line center. Now, some people think he may be more of a second-line center than a first-line center, but I think the expectation, given the fact of where they picked him and who they picked him over, is that he needs to be this team's first-team center. He is the most talented player they have. He is the highest draft choice that they have, and as far as the system is concerned. And this one's obvious. This one's easy. Brady Martin, number one, no doubt he's their top prospect. Tanner Molendyke. Now, the ETA for Tanner Molendyke to me is 2025. Does he start at Milwaukee where he can pair with Andrew Gibson on that first pair and really play first pair minutes and first penalty kill and quarterback that power play and things that down the road they're going to ask him to do in the NHL, but probably not right away? Or does he start up on the third pair, say as the left shot guy with Justin Barron on the right shot? I mean, Barry Trotz has told me that Andrew Burnett has wanted Tanner Molendyke on the team out of camp each of the last 2 years. He's absolutely going to get his wish. At some point this season, Tanner Molendyke is going to be a Nashville Predator. It would not shock me if he starts the year with the team. It would not shock me if he's here after a month. And it would also not shock me if they say, no, we want him and Gibson to play together and we're going to take it slow and we're going to put Willsby and Barron on that last pair, but he'll be up here in 2025. Matthew Wood, who was taken in the first round in 23, actually ahead of Tanner Molendyke. He's got an ETA of 2026. Let me say this. I liked what I saw out of Matthew Wood last year when he got called up. When he got called up, I knew what it was. It was a, hey, son, if you don't go back to college and you sign this entry-level contract and we can get you into the fold, we'll put you in the NHL. We'll let you get the nice life where you get to go out and you get to be an NHL player and you get to fly on the charters and you get to stay at the nice hotels and you get to talk to the girls and tell them you're an NHL player. And I actually was impressed with how he played. He's not ready for the NHL. And I have his ETA as 2026, which would be next season, along with Brady Martin. But I do think that they believe he is a potential first-line winger. I think he's probably more of a second-line winger, but a power play type specialist. And ultimately, I see him being the guy that they view that when Stamkos' deal is up, after 3 more seasons, he would be the guy they would want to take the spot of Steven Stamkos. Matthew Wood, as of right now, is the third prospect in the Predators pipeline. Cameron Reed, the second first-round pick that the Predators had the other night. A lot of the gurus absolutely loved the Cam Reed pick. I believe it was at 21. The Predators moved up, but they absolutely loved the Cam Reed pick. saying this is exactly where they thought he might go. He might even go a little bit higher, but he's a big left shot defenseman who profiles as a first or second pair guy. You can never have enough good defensemen in the pipeline. It sounds to me, now Matthias Ekholm is right-handed, is a right shot defenseman, which is more valuable than a left shot guy. And Cam Reed's a left shot guy. But when I read the scouting report on Cam Reed, it seems like that's the kind of player they expect him to be, which is a steady top 4 pair defenseman. He's not super big. He's not Hal Gill, but he is big enough. And I think he's athletic and he's a decent enough skater and he's a tough enough player. And so Cam Reed, I think that's a guy a lot of people like. I think he is not going to be up as soon. I've got his ETA as 2028. So it's going to take him some time. You know, he's going to probably, I don't know, juniors, college, whatever, and do that. And then probably in 2 years, he'll be in Milwaukee, and then he'll be in Milwaukee for 2 years. So 2028 is the ETA I have on Cam Reed. It'll be a little bit, but I do believe that they see him as a talent. Igor Surin, the first-round pick in last year's draft. Now, Igor Surin is an uber-talented center who is very boomer bust. I think he's kind of the definition when it comes to Barry Trotz taking big swings. Now, Igor Surin offensively impressed as an 18-year-old playing with grown men. He has extended his KHL contract and would not be eligible to join the Predators until the end of the 2027 KHL season. So I have his ETA as 2028, but it's probably more likely that his ETA is going to be 2029. I put it at 28 because he's probably going to leverage the KHL as his reason for, hey, put me on the big club or I'm going to stick around in the KHL or whatever. So maybe they have to put him on the team in 2028. But I've got Surin's ETA as 28, probably more likely to be about 2029. He's got a lot of talent. Apparently, he's got a very big personality, too. The talent to be a first-line center. But again, talent and potential is French for not good enough. So let's see if he can develop that talent while playing against grown men in the KHL. Igor Surin is the number 5 prospect. David Edstrom. I do not believe David Edstrom has first-line center potential, which I do believe that Igor Surin has. But I believe David Edstrom's going to be on the team at some point this upcoming season. I put his ETA at 2025 or at 2026. And I do believe David Edstrom is going to be either the second or third-line center of the future, kind of along the lines of the game that Ryan O'Reilly has, which is Ryan O'Reilly can kill penalties. Ryan O'Reilly can be on the power play. Probably somewhere in between Ryan O'Reilly and Calle Yarncroke of the kind of player that David Edstrom's going to be. He's played in a lot of high-end international competition, and he got a lot better year over year, going to the World Juniors as an 18-year-old to a 19-year-old. He's going to be 20, so he's still a little young, and you know how the Predators like to do this. They call guys up and then send them down and call them up and send them down. And if he spends a lot of time on the big club, Burnett's going to scratch the hell out of him this upcoming season because that's what Burnett does. But I do think that they view him as an answer down the middle. I think we will see him this upcoming season. David Edstrom is the 6th best prospect, ETA 25 or 26. Riker Lee, the 3rd first-round pick from Friday night. I have been talking to people that have been watching this kid at the development camp, and they are telling me this kid has got some juice. Now, he's very young, and he's going to Michigan State. So he's probably going to play at Michigan State for 2 years. And then, because he's so young, he's still probably going to have to spend time in Milwaukee. I've got his ETA at 2029, which is when you'd see Riker Lee. And I know you're going to sit there and say, that's 4 years. Yeah, I know. These things do take time. But I've been told, as far as the talent is concerned, the puck handling, the shot, from the people that have been at the development camp, they have like what they've seen out of Riker Lee. He is the 7th best prospect on my list for the Predators. Joakim Kimmel, and he will be up with the big club this year. Joakim Kimmel was their first-round pick in 2022. He has made his NHL debut, and he's been at the AHL the last 3 years. Here's my problem with Joakim Kimmel. He sounds like a goal-scoring winger, and everybody likes goal-scoring wingers. I like goal-scoring wingers. But then I look at his AHL stats, and it's not like he's really lighting it up down there. And so I'm like, if Joakim Kimmel's stats aren't very good, he's not lighting it up, and he keeps going down to Milwaukee, and the Predators are never like, we got to get Kimmel up here. Maybe it's because, well, he just isn't that good. Last year for the Milwaukee Admirals, he had 40 points in 65 games. He played 2 games last year and did not have a point in the NHL. He was -10, though in the playoffs, he did have 3 goals in 10 games, 8 points in 10 games for Milwaukee. He's going to be up there, but I'm not sure. To me, he's probably more of like a second line guy, probably more of like a Craig Smith type guy. And I don't think much of Craig Smith. Joakim Kimmel's number 8. Andrew Gibson, a right shot big defenseman. Now, the gurus do not like Andrew Gibson. And I believe Andrew Gibson will be up in 2025 or 2026. That's his ETA of 25 or 26. The Predators love him. They wanted to draft him in 23. Detroit scooped him. They traded a second rounder in 24 in order to get him, and they love him. Barry absolutely gushes when he talks about Andrew Gibson. And I believe the Predators view Andrew Gibson as their future right shot first pair defenseman to go with Tanner Mullendijk as their top left shot pair defenseman. They played together at the World Juniors for Team Canada, and Trotz absolutely loved what he saw. Andrew Gibson is number 9. Teddy Stiga, who I don't think we'll see until 2028. He's going back to Boston College. He is their second-round pick a year ago. He was drafted as a center, but he's really a winger. He's on the Team USA national team, scored the golden goal at the World Juniors, which means something to Trotz. But he's probably not as talented as the guys listed ahead of him. And, again, solid player and the kind of guy you want on your team, middle 6 forward, but probably not the talents that everybody else is ahead of him. So that's the top 10 list. Corey Curtis, News 2 will join us next, coming up here on the program. Fireball Hot Take Friday at Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
Barry, you mentioned draft night, Brady Martin, and the mentality that he's going to bring to camp here. As we sit here on July 1st, how much of an open mind do you have about him coming in and challenging
I have
for a
an
spot?
open mind. This young man, nothing would surprise me. This guy's he's got tons of confidence. I think he's a guy that pulls you into the fight. Someone was asking me, who do you remind me of? And I sometimes I show my age, but he's got the Bobby Clark-ish type of mentality. He's got more skill than you thought. He will hurt you. He'll pull guys into the fight. All those things that that make your team better when it matters, and he steps up when it matters. So, he get a chance at training camp to step up, and it was funny. He came in and he saw Mike McCarron walk by, and he's like, I got to go against him. Yes, you do. And he goes, no problem. So I think you got to be excited. I think our fan base, you're going to love this kid. I know you are. I would bet my life on it.
He would bet his life on it, on Brady Martin, whom he compares to Bobby Clark, who is a 2-time Cup winner, a 3-time MVP, a Hall of Famer who won a Selkie, and one of the 100 greatest players in the history of the NHL. Corey Curtis, News 2, joins us now on the program. So, Corey, we start there. I mean, clearly we knew that Barry Trotz liked Brady Martin because he drafted him with the 5th pick over James Higgins, over Porter Martone. But he says he bet his life that the fans will love him and compares him to Bobby Clark. Your reaction?
I have never heard Barry Trotz gush about one of his players with the Nashville Predators like that ever. Now, he used to call Pekka, best goalie in the world. He, of course, had a ton of affinity for Shea Weber and several other players. But I have especially a guy who is a prospect at this point, for him to openly gush about him, I have never heard that before. And for a guy who loves to have guys marinate in Milwaukee, to suggest that he may not marinate at all is shocking. It is shocking. And I wonder how high he would have picked him. Like if he was picking 3rd still, it sounds like Brady Martin still would have been the pick.
It's funny you ask that because there are not very many general managers that after a draft you can ask, hey, how did your board shake out? And they'll actually tell you. They'll always, it was a top guy on our board, or it was I'll never forget when the Titans drafted Javon Curse. Andrea Kramer was at St. Thomas Sports Park for ESPN, and she was like, I just talked to former general manager Floyd Reese, and they are elated to pick Javon Curse, whom they had 7th on their board. And I think they were picking 16th or something like that. They just don't talk like that anymore.
Yeah.
To your point, I think Barry may actually tell us at some point where he had Martin on the board. I'm going to guess he probably had Martin, 3, 4 maybe?
Yeah.
Surely Schaefer and Misa were probably
Schaefer
and Misa were probably 1 and 2. Was Martin 3?
Well, I mean, they took the big guy with the back before him, and you can't think he was McQueen. You can't think that he was behind him. So I bet he was 3. That's my bet, but who knows? I mean, he loves him. I mean, like adopted son. All right. I mean, they'll be riding tandem bikes through Crockett Park together.
So when I saw in The Athletic before the draft that they had done kind of a ranking of the skills. So who had the best shot? Who was the best skater? Who was the smartest?
Mm-hmm.
Who was Brady Martin was number 1 in terms of best competitor. And they wrote at the time, this is not even particularly close. Like there is not really a close second in terms of the compete with Brady Martin. And I read that and I said, that is a Trotz guy right then and there.
Yep.
How much value do you personally put on something like that? Because for a lot of Preds fans that didn't like this pick, and I didn't necessarily like the pick, but for a lot of Preds fans who crapped on it like compete level isn't that big of a deal, I remind you of Ryan Johansson. So how big of a deal is that quote unquote compete level when we are evaluating a prospect?
I think it's very big because that is something that shows up every day. And those are the guys that help you win even when they're not having their best night. And he talks about dragging guys into the fight. You're talking about a culture setter. You're talking about a guy who changes the culture of the team. And this team needs pillars. It needs a new core. And I think you're pointing at him as one of those guys in 5 years who's the core of this hockey team. I think you would point to him and Molendyke, and then I don't know who the third one would be. But, you know, those are the guys you're hoping, if you're the Predators, are going to be the core of your hockey team. And I really think, you know, the Matthew Tkachuk element of him is what is so incredibly attractive, you know, for Barry and the team right now, because yes, he can score. Yes, he can skate, but he's a guy you win with in the postseason. That's what I think they're thinking, is he's a guy you win with in the postseason. He's a guy who shows up at playoff time when it all gets harder, when it all gets more physical, when it all gets grittier. And I think that's what they're enamored with, and that's what they're absolutely in love with, because as we talked about, they have not had a lot of chances to draft elite level scoring talent in the history of the organization. So to pass up on the possibility of that for this guy must tell you that compete level and all the things that come with it were so incredible to them that they couldn't pass it up.
Corey Curtis, News 2, is our guest here on the program. I mean, I would be lying if I said I knew a lot about all these prospects, and
Absolutely.
I would assume that you probably don't know a whole lot about these
Absolutely.
guys either. But I wanted them to draft Higgins. I don't know. Did you think they were going to draft Higgins when they were sitting there? You know, the question I have for you is, if you had a feeling one way or another about any of these guys, if you own the team and Barry Trotz took his pants off for Brady Martin the way he did in that press conference right there, and you own the team and you wanted Higgins or you wanted Martone because you view Martone as a 40-goal scoring winger,
Yeah.
you know, if Barry came to you and said, Mr. Curtis, I am telling you, this kid, I bet my life on him, would you say, take the kid? How would you react?
I hired Barry to do a job. Pick the best player. Pick the guy who's going to help us hoist the cup. If that's who you think it is, great. If he's not it, you're going to be fired. And that's the job. That's the job. And that's why you hire these people to do those jobs, because they watch all the tape. They go to the games. They talk to the coaches. They meet everyone. They do all the work. They know, like you're saying, you know, I can watch a game of the U.S. Juniors sometime or something, or maybe a bean pot game or whatever. I mean, you know, but I don't see these guys play regularly, and I could see them play the worst game of their life or the best game of their life and have a totally skewed opinion of them because I don't have depth of knowledge of any of them. That's why you have a scouting staff. That's why you have a general manager, and you have to trust them. And if you don't trust them, you got to go hire somebody else.
Corey Curtis, News 2, is with us on the program. What do you make of the Predators' actions in free agency and lack of shocking big moves in free agency?
Well, after last year, it doesn't surprise me a ton that they didn't, you know, go out like drunken sailors. But I mean, this is, you know, as he said, it's time for the young kids to play. We've seen the young kids come up, and they haven't done a whole heck of a lot. I mean, Parson got a chance last year. He got sent away. Tommy Novak got a contract and he got sent away. You know, we've seen a number of these guys come up and get the opportunity, and you know, we're waiting for some of them to deliver. I mean, Luke Evangelista's got to have a big bounce back year. You know, last year was not a great year for Luke Evangelista. He's got to be better than he was last year. And so these young guys, and I know Svechnikov's young, and I know they love him, but you know, these guys, they better deliver, or people are going to look back at this free agency period and go, man, you were counting on this for what?
Corey Curtis with us on the program. When it comes to the team this upcoming season, Barry Trotz says that he thinks he's fixed the defense with Nick Hague and Nick Perbix.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And said that with Yossi coming back, that it will be better for Saros, whom Trotz said got unfairly criticized last year. And I'm not going to lie to you, I think he was kind of talking about me. That said, I mean, I think, where else is Trotz hearing that from? He comes on my show every week and I bitch about the goalie. I mean, I got to believe that's where that's coming from. Do you think that Barry Trotz is right and that UC Saros last year was unfairly criticized? Or did you think UC Saros wasn't good enough last year?
Well, look, the defense wasn't good enough last year, but the goalie's job is to erase shots, right? And so, do we feel like he could have erased more of them than he did? Yeah, I think we all do. But they certainly could have been better in front of him. But I think that there's a higher level to UC Saros' game for sure.
How do you expect the Predators to be this upcoming season, Corey?
Yeah, that is really an interesting question. Last year is, the most disappointing season in Predators history, right? I don't think there's anything
I think
close.
so. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything close. So I would expect them to be better than that. I'm excited to see, how some of these young guys. I really want to see Tanner Molendyk on the team this year. I want to see Tanner Molendyk. I want to see what he can do with the hockey club. And of course, I want to see if Svechkov can be a year better and if Evangelista can bounce back. But if they start slowly, then there could be big changes on the way, because they can't have another year like last year. They don't have to be the second best team in their division or necessarily the third best team, but they got to be a heck of a lot more competitive than they were a year ago. And I think the most disturbing things to come out of the end of last season was kind of the lack of chemistry stuff, the lack of buy-in stuff that Marcia's show talks about, that Trotz talked about, that they got to have a better buy-in, because none of that's talent. None of that's talent. And so if they don't get that stuff fixed, then they got big problems. So, look, I expect it to be better. I expect these guys to have some pride about them where they're embarrassed about last year. But, much like with the Titans offensive line, they're going to have to prove it to me.
Corey Curtis, News 2 on our program. Fireball Hot Take Friday on a Thursday. Corey, what's your hot take this week?
When you think about in the last 20 years, the generation and who is the greatest, most dominant athlete of our generation, you could, talk about guys like, Kobe and LeBron and in the NBA, you could talk about, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady in the NFL and Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. The most dominant athlete of the last 20 years will take the field tomorrow in Coney Island when Joey Chestnut goes for the hot dog championship. He is in a class of one, Jared. No matter how disgusting, no matter how wasteful we may view the world of gluttony and competitive eating, he is in a class of one, and he will win massively tomorrow and cast shame upon all the wiener eaters out there.
Will you count esports as athletes too?
No.
Oh, okay. Give me a break, Joey Chestnut. Corey Curtis, happy birthday to America. We will talk soon.
All right. Happy birthday, brother. We'll talk to you later.
Yep. Corey Curtis, News 2, joining us on the program. Joey Chestnut is an athlete. Come on now. 615-737-1025 here on our program. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025. So I do wonder one thing, when it comes to the Predators, we'll get to that next because I don't know exactly how I feel. I really don't. We'll get to that next. I'm going to Company 105 the Game.
You
in some
mentioned
ways
at the end of last year, needing to take some time away and get away from it and then going.
think the GER staff of the Preds have been on Andrew Burnett recently for a couple of the comments they made. The one that you ended the show with yesterday, where it wasn't as bad, and the clip that you just played, where it wasn't as bad as we thought it was.
Hey, take a step back, and it's not as bad as you think. I don't know about that, bro. Last year was pretty bad.
And, I mean, I've heard it a couple of times, but I just thought of something. When talking about Stamkos, Shea, and Marchessault, when they leave their teams, how long do we give them to grieve? Because it sounds like they never got over leaving their teams. And if that's if that's really true, or even if it's not, does Brunette really need to say that?
So I will say this. Trotz talked about this on the program, and it did kind of piss me off. Thank you for the call, Nate. Trotz talked about this on the program. The Predators did not go to Vegas last year until the end of the year. And you know how this works. They do video tributes now for anybody. You know, I'll never forget they did like a video tribute for Matt Irwin when he came back to play against the Predators, which I thought was crazy. I mean, they had a video tribute to John Hines when he made a return here. Now, not exactly Peter Laviolette, who went to the Cup final. And so they'll do video tributes nowadays for anybody. But Jonathan Marchessault was in Vegas from the very first day, went to 2 Stanley Cup finals, won one of them, and was the Conn Smythe. So he actually is deserving of a, salute from the fans. Now, like I went to the Braves-Dodgers game when Freddie Freeman made his return and was all in tears, with the fans and everything else, but he deserved it. So when it comes to the Marchessault thing, the Predators kind of highlighted last year that, we didn't play Vegas until the end, and it took, maybe that got Marchessault over it. And I'm like, you cannot have players that are that experienced in the league that need to say goodbye to their former team, and it take them a whole season to get their head out of their ass in order to do it. And if that's the case, then you got to do some more work on researching the kind of guys these players are before you bring them in. But if that was a problem, I guess I can look at it one of two ways. One way is that's sad. Like, that's sad. If Jonathan Marchessault can't pull his head out of his ass because he's still grieving that he's no longer a Vegas Golden Knight, that is pathetic, and that's not good. Or I can look at it and say, well, he's done grieving, and now on he goes. So which one do you want me to pick? Because I could say, hey, if that's the problem, good God, that's ridiculous. And I can also say on the other side of it, well, that's over anyway, so move on to next year. One texter says, and I don't know, I think this texter says, it feels like Poyle. I think you mean Trotz. It feels like, let's just say Trotz. It feels like Trotz wants a team of the from the movie Miracle yelling, I play for the United States, because having heart and playing hard does not alone win games. So I'm going to say this about Brady Martin and his competitive level. You can't just bank on one skill alone in anything, in any sport. You cannot be a great player just banking on one ability. You can be the most available player in the league, but if you can't skate, it's not going to do you any good. And you can have the best shot, but if you can't play in your own end and you get pushed around, then you're really only going to get very limited ice time, offensive zone draws, power plays, and that's it. And you can't be a first or second line guy if you do that. They're not saying Brady Martin's only skill is that he competes hard. That's not his only skill. But they're saying that his level of dedication and effort is so much higher than the average guy that it will propel him to be as good as he possibly can be. And I, again, knew when I read that he was the most competitive player in this draft, and it wasn't even close. I knew. I said on the air before the draft, I said, that is a Trotz quality. I actually predicted in the last segment on Friday before the draft that they would draft Brady Martin. I was not shocked when they passed Higgins for Martin because of that. But for everybody that's crapping on the effort, oh, well, yeah, it plays hard, but we need more than that. I continue to remind you of Ryan Johansson. And the fact that you and I both know, if Ryan Johansson had dedicated himself to the game the way they say Brady Martin is dedicated to the game, Ryan Johansson is probably still on the Nashville Predators, and Ryan Johansson is headed to the Hall of Fame. And I'm not here to knock on Johansson. He did some good things with the Predators. I'm not one of these people that believes that, if he was healthy, they would have won the cup, because he was healthy plenty of the time, and they didn't do jack. And I certainly don't think Johansson alone is good enough to make it better than Sidney Crosby, who took over that series. But if Ryan Johansson had Ryan O'Reilly's compete, he'd still be in the league. And so that is a skill, competitiveness, and dedication. It's not the only thing that you have to have in order to be an elite player, but it is a big deal. You know who was really competitive? Michael Jordan, Tom Brady. Again, those guys that just refuse to freaking lose. And I'm not saying Brady Martin is Michael Jordan and is so competitive that he's going to make up stuff and LeBradford Smith. LeBradford Smith dropped 30 on Michael one night, and then Michael Jordan told people that he said good game Mike to him, so he dropped 30 on him in the first half the next night, and then we found out that actually didn't even happen. LeBradford Smith never said that to Michael Jordan. Jordan made it up in order to motivate him to light him up. I'm not saying that's going to be Brady Martin, but to act like that's not a skill, I mean, come on now. One texter says, Jared, I think you got it right the other day when you said it doesn't seem like anyone over there knows why it didn't work last season. And now we're just going into another season with no one to answer for why it didn't work and hoping that it will this time. Why? How do you make changes to address an unspecified problem? Well, I'm going to really sum that up for you and just say, usually it's the coach. Like, usually if you don't know what the problem is, you fire the coach. Well, we don't know what it is. Can't fire all the players. What's the thing we do? Fire the coach. And they're not going to do that. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. 125 the game. Let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Have you ever had a plumber or electrician or HVAC tech call you and feel like they're trying to sell you something that you did not need? If a deal sounds too good to be true, like a $99 club membership or a $29 tune-up, that is because it is. The reality is they have to find something to fix so they can cover their costs for those quote-unquote discounted club memberships. Unlike the other guys, Hiller never offers deals designed to trick you or sell you something that you do not need. You all hear me talking about my friends at Hiller, but this is why I trust Hiller at my home. So do like I do and schedule online at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds of Falls and Vandy. Hiller, call the Hat Face Truck today. Stillman and Company Fireball Hot Take Friday. Hey, this Wednesday, come out to Brewhouse South in Cool Springs and meet national native and two-time IndyCar champion Joseph Newgarden from 5:30 to 7. Also, Big Joe will be on site for a special broadcast of Chasing Checkers from 6 to 7. So get out to Brewhouse South this Wednesday and meet Joseph Newgarden and get signed up to win tickets to the Borchetta Bourbon Music City Grand Prix. Also, I'm in a good mood. It is a holiday weekend, so let's give something away. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win tickets to Live Plus Collective Soul at First Bank Amphitheater on Sunday, August 10th. Let's get back into your phones as promised. One texter into the text line says, Craig says, my question is, when Burnett said this week is all about said that that's what this week is all about. What the hell has he been doing since the last regular season game? Of course, talking about Andrew Burnett. Robbie said, what was the reflection? And Andrew Burnett said, well, we're getting the coaching staff together, and that's what we're going to do a lot about this weekend. He says, what the hell's he been doing since the last regular season games? He needs to revamp his system so one of these guys on the team with the ability to score will actually be in position to do so. So here's what I'm going to say about Burnett and about what I did not like about his press availability 2 days ago, and the one thing that I do think Burnett needs to take seriously here. Because for whatever reason, he didn't get through the players. So this is the time of year that I call the football life time of year. What do I mean by that? Have any of you ever watched the Football Life documentaries on NFL Network? I've got them recorded, so I record them all, but you can also go on YouTube and you can watch the Football Life documentaries. And I mean, this time of the year, I will fall asleep watching the Football Life documentaries. This is where I really get into the history of the game. And that's how I know things about guys that played before I was born, like Drew Pearson and Lawrence Taylor and those kind of players. And last night, I was watching the Football Life documentary on Tom Landry. Now, just know that Andrew Burnett has been a head coach for 3 years. He's been a finalist for Coach of the Year 2 out of those 3 years, which is way better than Tom Landry's first 3 years. Tom Landry would have been fired after year 2. But one story that all the older players told about Tom Landry was after a game, Landry, who never showed emotion on the sidelines, Landry, who was never too closely connected with the players, Landry, who is kind of like a cyborg, the way they described him in terms of kind of how he operated. After a game that the Cowboys lost, Tom Landry cried and told the guys, I did not do a good enough job coaching you. And that from that moment on, all these players, and it wasn't just Dan Reeves, but he's the one I can think of off the top of my head, all these players were like, from that moment on, we knew that Coach Landry was our guy that we were going to run through a wall for. When it comes to Burnett, I think Burnett needs to level with everybody. I think he needs to level with the players. I think he needs to level with the fans. I think he needs to level with the media, which is really the way of leveling with the fans. And I think Burnett needs to get out of the coach talk, and I think he needs to be more honest about what happened last year. I think he needs to be more honest about why it didn't work. I think he needs to be more honest about what he's going to do differently. I think he's got to be more genuine with, hey, I really screwed up last year. And I know I'm a good coach, but I'm obviously not a good coach right now because of what happened. But guys, let's do this together because here are the changes I'm making. Here are the sacrifices I'm willing to make. The reflection in the mirror that I took. Because the cliches in the coach talk, that didn't work last year. I don't think it's going to work this year. 615-737-1025 here on the program. 615-737-1025 on the program. So, there is one thing that I have noticed about the Titans fan base and the Preds fan base, which again, I think has a very strong overlap, even if they are two separate fan bases. And we'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 to the game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee on a de facto Fireball Hot Take Friday with the holiday tomorrow. And as I have said, after this week, all the Canadians that cover the NHL, all the Canadians that play in the NHL, all the Canadians that coach in the NHL, they leave. The season's over. Development camp's over. The draft's over. Free agency, for the most part, is over. And when it's over, they all go to their cottages. And that's what we are doing with Hockey Talk, is we are putting it at the cottage. Because training camp is 2 weeks away. And I say all of this just to say that I've been thinking about something that I do want to get off my chest. And that is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And there is a text into the text line that is just perfect to set this up. One texter in our phone line streamed by WilsonCountyHunter.com says, you tell Cam Ward to get his head out of his rear end and prove it, and then Brady Martin, you give him credit for because he's competitive. Which I've never told Cam Ward to get his head out of his ass. I think it's a little presumptuous for him to have his own docu-series, but I never said get your head out of your ass. But the reason I say this is because I think the angst and disappointment, and let me be frank, I was disappointed too about the Predators' pick of Brady Martin over James Higgins, has settled as far as the fans are concerned. It's been not forgiven, not forgotten, but they've just stopped crying about it, I think. But it hasn't changed the way Preds fans felt a week ago when the Predators shockingly picked Brady Martin because of that competitiveness over a James Higgins and over a Porter Martone. I still think that disappointment exists. And yet, I see almost no difference between the justification for Cam Ward and what the expectation for Cam Ward is going to be, and what the justification for Brady Martin and what the expectations for Brady Martin are going to be. And while the fan bases, the Preds fan base and the Titans fan base, are not a complete one-for-one overlap, I do think that there is a lot of overlap, and I do think they are pretty similar. I think there are a lot of Titans fans who are Predators fans, and I think there are a lot of Predators fans who are Titans fans. And yet, the reaction to the picks could not be more different. When it came to Cam Ward, going into the draft, when the Titans had the number one pick, Titans fans were depressed going into this draft with the number one pick because this was the wrong year to have the number one pick. Trevor Lawrence wasn't there. Caleb Williams wasn't there. Joe Burrow wasn't there. Andrew Luck wasn't there. There wasn't that slam dunk 1-1 quarterback. And there really wasn't a 1-2 quarterback where it's like, okay, which flavor of ice cream do you like better? And when it came to the Preds and the Preds situation and the Preds fans, I think Preds fans were depressed the night of the draft lottery when they got the 5th overall pick for a team that had aspirations of getting the 1st overall pick and had a record deserving of the 3rd overall pick. And yet, even though the draft process began with Titans fans depressed and with the general consensus being that none of the quarterbacks in this year's class were worthy of the number one pick, and Titans fans legitimately excited about trading the 1st pick and talks about Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, they convinced themselves that Cam Ward was the guy. They went from depressed and no quarterbacks in this draft to Cam Ward is the next Steve McNair, Jared. Cam Ward is the next Mahomes, Jared. They convinced themselves. The draft gurus didn't think it. Except, I guess, Louis Riddick. But Mel Kiper Jr. sitting there saying, I mean, I'll tell you right now, J.J. McCarthy would have been the number one pick in this year's draft. None of the draft gurus said, oh, yeah, this kid, Cam Ward, he's got superstar written all over him. He's got generational written all over him. They didn't say that. He wasn't an exceptional college player. There wasn't really any of that. And yet all I hear about is how great he is. He's a winner, Jared. Really? Because he didn't win the ACC. He didn't win the national championship. He didn't even get to the ACC championship game. He's a winner. He's competitive, Jared. He shows up at 5 a.m. And then there's Brady Martin. And when it comes to Brady Martin, again, Predators fans were depressed at the onset of the draft season because the Predators essentially lost the draft lottery. The worst they could have picked was 5th, and they ended up picking 5th. Then there were some guys out there that Predators fans maybe got their hopes up that could one day become a number 1 center. And the Predators went totally off the board, and they took Brady Martin. Again, they didn't take a guy who wasn't worthy of a top 10 pick. They didn't take a guy that the gurus didn't think should be taken in the first round. They took a guy who was probably viewed as the 7th, 8th, 10th best player in the draft, and they took him with the 5th pick. Cam Ward was viewed as a 7th, 8th, 10th best player, 13th best player, 17th best player in the draft. They took him with the number 1 pick. And yet, on one hand, when it comes to Ward, Titans fans are already fitting him for a gold jacket. Titans fans say he's the next Steve McNair. They say he's the next Patrick Mahomes. And I've said, well, maybe they should sit him on the bench and develop him somebody. How dare you say that, Jared? Well, you do know that Mahomes and McNair sat on the bench. Yeah, but Cam Ward doesn't need to sit on the bench. He's Superman to this fan base. Nothing he does is wrong. He throws an interception, says it doesn't count. Everybody, ha, 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 ha. Fan base loves him. And that's fine. I mean, I hope he ends up being that dude. I don't think he's going to be that dude, but I hope he does. But again, Titans fans talk themselves from, oh man, this is the wrong year to have the number 1 pick because the quarterbacks in this class aren't very good, to Cam Ward is the next Mahomes, but he's even better than Mahomes because unlike Mahomes, he doesn't need to sit on the bench. It's a little crazy. Predators kind of did the same thing. And what's the number 1 thing when it comes to Cam Ward that Titan fans are obsessed with? It's his competitiveness. It's the showing up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's the dedication. Cam Ward is not exceptionally big. He is not exceptionally athletic. He does not have a great arm. He is not an incredibly accurate quarterback. He wasn't a great college player. Wasn't any of that. But they love the story. They love the 0-star recruit that would not be stopped. And he'll show everybody. And again, I don't think the Titan fan base and the Predators fan base is an exact 1-for-1 fan base where all the Titans fans are Predators fans and all the Predators fans are Titans fans. But I think there's a big overlap. And what's the big thing about Brady Martin's game? It's his competitiveness. This farm boy will stop at nothing. This kid, Barry Trotz, has compared to Bobby Clark, who is a 3-time MVP, 2-time Cup-winning Hall of Famer. None of the gurus see him as that, just like none of the gurus thought that Cam Ward was some generational quarterback, with the exception of Louis Riddick, who also thought the same thing about Shedeur Sanders. The gurus don't see it. At the beginning of the process, you didn't see it. But when your team drafted him because you want to believe that he's the guy, in football, you believed he's the guy, Jared. In hockey, it's, oh, who cares if he's competitive? We need a number 1 center, Jared. Shouldn't you feel the exact same way about Cam Ward that you do about Brady Martin? Because guess what? I do. I feel the exact same way about Cam Ward as I do Brady Martin. My team drafted Cam Ward with the number 1 pick, and my team drafted Brady Martin with the number 5 pick. And I hope Cam Ward becomes a superstar quarterback. And I hope that the next time we're sitting here talking about who should be quarterback of the Titans, it's 2040. I really hope that. And I hope Brady Martin is the next Jonathan Taves, and you get 8 All-Star appearances and 3 Stanley Cups out of it, because this two-way center is so good and so competitive, and he's the greatest leader, and he leads this team to victory, and he's the next Bobby Clark. Again, 2 things that the Titans and the Predators really haven't had, which is one of the reasons they haven't had a lot of sustained success. They haven't truly had a franchise quarterback outside of McNair, and they haven't truly had a number 1 center. And so I hope this is what they both become. But I kind of feel the same about them getting there. The intangibles seem to be good enough. Now, I'm a little worried again about the vanity Cam Ward doing his own docuseries. Me and my team pitched our docuseries. Tubi took it. That does bother me. But all the extra storylines about the 0-star recruit or the farm boy or all that doesn't, I don't, okay. They're competitive. They're dedicated. They're hardworking. They think they can do it. They're going to push themselves. That's great. You have to have that. Does Brady Martin have the talent? Does Cam Ward have the talent? Is Brady Martin going to have the coaching around him? Is this organization going to let him go to juniors and develop him the right way? Or are they going to say, all right, son, we drafted you 5th. Now you're going out there with Steven Stamkos and a coach we may fire in 3 weeks. Same with Cam Ward. Does he have the receivers to throw to? Does he have a head coach who knows what he's doing? I don't know. But to me, their strengths, their stories, the reason you took them are the same. The expectations are the same. The gurus don't see Cam as a franchise quarterback. Dane Brugler compared his ability level, his talent level, to that of a Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is not an elite quarterback in the NFL. The gurus think that Brady Martin is more of a number 2 center than he is a number 1 center. Your teams have said, no. We think he's a franchise quarterback. No. We think he's Bobby Clark. They're kind of the same guy. And yet one fan base is ready to send their guy to the Hall of Fame, and the other one's still disappointed that they drafted him. And I'm not sure I totally understand it. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. A lot of people want to get in on this, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Stillman and Company, Fireball Hot Take Friday, 1025, 106 again.
Barry, you mentioned draft night, Brady Martin, and the mentality that he's going to bring to camp here. As we sit here on July 1st, how much of an open mind do you have about him coming in and challenging
I have
for a
an
spot?
open mind. This young man, nothing would surprise me. This guy's he's got tons of confidence. I think he's a guy that pulls you into the fight. Someone was asking me, who do you remind me of? And sometimes I show my age, but he's got the Bobby Clark-ish type of mentality. He's got more skill than you thought. He will hurt you. He'll pull guys into the fight. All those things that that make your team better when it matters, and he steps up when it matters. So, he get a chance at training camp to step up, and it was funny. He came in and he saw Mike McCarron walk by, and he's like, I got to go against him. Yes, you do. And he goes, no problem. So I think you got to be excited. I think our fan base, you're going to love this kid. I know you are. I would bet my life on it.
There you go. That was Barry Trotz talking about Brady Martin. Again, the gurus do not see what you see when it comes to the Brady Martin pick, just like the Cam Ward pick. He's Mahomes, Jared. Really? Because Dane Brugler says he's Kyler Murray. And not only that, but they've got him as the 17th best player on the board. Corey Pronman in The Athletic, when the Predators picked Brady Martin, gave it a C+. Said, I've known Martin going in the top 5 was a possibility for weeks, but I've struggled to get around to the idea. He's a super likable person and player with great physicality and a very good talent base. I would not call him a dynamic offensive player, though. With average size, I just don't love this profile at 5. Again, the gurus are saying, but the team's saying he's Bobby Clark, a 2-time Cup-winning, 3-time Hall of Famer. Just like saying Cam Ward is Mahomes, Jared. It's the same. And yet Titan fans are obsessed. Like, they think anybody who says Cam Ward isn't Mahomes is crazy. Like, again, I think Cam Ward should sit for at least the first 2 weeks of the season so I can get the Denver defense and Jared Verse out of the way. And then if I have to stick him out there, Titans fans are like, how dare you? Where meanwhile, Predators fans, and I think it's arguably a lot of the same fan base, Predators fans are like, we passed on Porter Martone and James Higgins. Just odd. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Derek is up next here on our program. Derek, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jared, I agree with you on a lot of your assessment of the position of both guys, but I would say the difference is Cam was the best quarterback in the draft, and the hockey player Martin, it was always people considered 2 other guys ahead of him in the pecking order. So when you passed on the guys that everybody heard were better than him, you get a different reaction. With Cam, everybody like, okay, everybody says he's no one guy. We're gonna pick this guy first. He's no one guy, and we've seen some of Cam's work ethic. We haven't seen him in the game or anything yet, but we've seen some of his work ethic. Now, when we get to training camp with the Martin, maybe we'll see something to be positive about him as well.
When have we seen some of Cam's work ethic?
I mean, OTAs, many camp, we've heard reports of how hard he works, how, it gives people optimism. I know you don't like the sunshine pumping. I know you.
Did you not just hear what Barry said about Bobby Clark Jr.?
But we haven't seen him in training camp yet. We haven't seen him in preseason or anything like that at all. We only just heard of him. We haven't, gotten to, like people had doubts about Cam, and then when they saw, he's coming to, the building at 5 o'clock every day, and he's leaving at 5 o'clock every night, and it kind of gives you a little bit.
You didn't feel that way about Brady Martin not being at the draft because he had to go take care and feed the hogs on the farm?
Well, okay, to be totally honest with you, Jared, I'm not that much of a hockey guy. Really, most of what I know about hockey, I get from you. You seem to be well informed, and I kind of listen to you, and I listen to Vickett and them, a little bit. And I'm a little more optimistic than most fans is when it comes to Martin, but I'm still. I ain't gonna lie. When all the experts were saying that the other two guys were better than him, and we passed on those guys, they were talking about how dynamic they were and everything, and how just this guy is. It kind of gives everybody pause. But with Cam, even though he's not the best prospect ever, he was the best guy available.
So I think it is. I think it is incredibly foolish. Thank you for the call, Derek. I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think some of this is, again, Cam Ward played in college, and we watch college football. We do not watch 17-year-olds play hockey in Canada, and we're not going to, and I don't watch it, and you shouldn't watch it either, unless you want to, and then go ahead and be my guest. So I think there is something to that. I think the other thing, too, is not only that, we knew for months they were going to take Cam Ward, so that allowed people to kind of cross the picket line. But more importantly, I think a lot of this, too, is about, well, Cam was the top quarterback in the draft, Jared. Right. But that doesn't matter in terms of winning and losing in football. Because one thing that I really struggled with when it came to the decision to draft Cam Ward was where he compared to other quarterbacks in the previous drafts. For instance, ESPN talked to all these former executives and had them rank the last five quarterback classes, and to rank them all as prospects coming out, not what they've done in the league, but as prospects coming out. And Trevor Lawrence was the number one guy. Now, we know Trevor Lawrence hasn't been the number one quarterback, but Trevor Lawrence was the number one prospect, and Caleb Williams was 2, and Joe Burrow was 3, and Jaden Daniels was 4, and Cam was down there at the bottom behind Bo Nix. And people would say, well, but we don't care. We don't care where Cam Ward was ranked because he's the top quarterback in this draft. Doesn't matter where he's compared to J.J. McCarthy and compared to Drake May and compared to Bo Nix. Well, I actually disagree, because if you traded the pick, you wouldn't have to draft a quarterback this year. You could draft a quarterback next year. You could sign a quarterback in the future. You could do something. But if you take Cam and he's not as good as Bo Nix, well, guess who you play week 1? You're not playing Jackson Dart. You're not playing Shedeur Sanders and Tyler Shuck. You're playing Bo Nix. You're playing Matthew Stafford. So it's, where does Cam compare to all these other quarterbacks? Where does Cam compare to C.J. Stroud? Now, you and I both know that when it comes to their comparison of draft prospects, Cam is not the same caliber that C.J. Stroud was. Well, you have to compete against C.J. Stroud every single week. Even if you're not playing him in that game that week, when you look at the standings, you want Houston to lose. Oh, they lost. That's good. You see what I'm saying? And just because the gurus say you're a good player doesn't mean you will be. And just because they say you're a bad player doesn't mean you will be. And we all know that when it comes to the draft. But I think just the idea of that's just telling yourself what you want to hear. Well, we know Cam doesn't rank that high, but he's the best in this draft, so yay! I'm like, I so do not believe this. Text into the text line. I've heard from a good source. The text line. I heard from a good source. I've heard from a good source that the Predators told Brady Martin not to come to the draft because they wanted to make the big deal about him being a farm boy and create the story about him not wanting to be able to leave because he was too busy doing chores. But yet he hadn't even been home. He had been in the OHL playing hockey. This was all a publicity stunt to make Nashville have a good feeling and a feel-good story instead of possibly picking the best player. Interesting. Yeah, I don't buy that. I think that is such bullcrap. One texter says, please tell me what's wrong with fans thinking that way. What does it hurt for fans to be overly excited? I'm not saying you can't be overly excited, but there's a difference between being excited and getting mad at me and say, he's Mahomes, Jared. And then when I say, okay, well, should you sit him on the bench? No. But how can you not sit him on the bench? How can you say he's Mahomes? Mahomes had to sit on the bench. Oh, but Jared, you don't understand. And that once you start having those intellectually dishonest points, then I just kind of roll my eyes and I say, okay, fine, whatever. Okay, fine, whatever. Like, if you were to sit there and say, when it comes to Cam Ward, like, hey, I think that he has the ability to one day become Mahomes. And then I would say to you, okay, well, then should they put him on the bench? And you were to say to me, well, he did play 54 games in college and he's 22 years old. So, or 24, whatever he is. So let's see where he is in the preseason. But I probably would be thinking to myself, you know, if the team's not good, maybe right around that Arizona, Vegas, Patriots, Colts stretch in the schedule where it's not the Denver Broncos with the defensive player of the year in the top 10 defense, and it's not the LA Rams with Jared Verse. You know, once we get past, yeah, maybe we do something like that. Then I'd say, okay, that's an intellectually honest point. But when you just say, he's Mahomes, should you sit him on the bench? No! Now you're just talking out of your ass. And that's where I struggle with. You know, when it comes to Brady Martin, what I say, I don't think he's going to be up this year. But I do think that maybe, hey, let's give him the 9 games and see if he can play if you want to. But if not, he probably ends up in juniors, and that's probably for the best instead of saying, hey, we picked you 5th, and, you know, you're our guy, so now you're playing next to Stamkos, and you better do well. But to me, they're roughly the same guys. 615-737-1025. This is kind of our final day of the hockey offseason. And so I have one big picture Predators question to ask, which we'll do next. Stillman and Company, 1025. Want to see you again.
it was a hard year on all of us. And I know the players are a little embarrassed, as we all are. And, we're not, we're just looking to improve. We're not putting expectations on us. I think it was fair or unfair last year, obviously coming in the year. And I think we wore that really heavy all year. And this year, I think we're going to have a chip on our shoulder and we're out to prove people wrong. And sometimes if you can bottle that up, that could be a really deadly attribute to our group going forward.
Okay, that was Andrew Burnett talking about, hey, we're going to be motivated this year. We're going to be motivated. And I don't know where I land on what I want or would be okay with happening next year. I mean, for Burnett's sake, like if they're god-awful, he's got to go. I mean, that's just how it works. And so that's different than how I feel about what would happen for this upcoming season. I do wonder how the fans feel. Last year was just so bad. High expectations. Team comes out struggling out of the gate. Never really rights the ship. These massively long losing streaks. And they really were irrelevant for most of the year. Now, the Trotz interviews were hard to do from my standpoint every week to ask him whether or not he was going to fire the coach, only to hear him say things like, oh, yeah, we just are going to get some of the young guys. So you'll see Ozzy Weisblatt this week. It's like, oh, okay, great. But big picture, if I could sit down with the entire Predators fan base right now and make a deal, a settlement out of court, if you will, and I said, you can get the number 1 overall pick in the draft, but you're going to be awful this upcoming season, I think they would take it. The problem is there is no guarantee, no matter how bad you are, that you're going to get the number 1 overall pick in a draft. And we all know the Predators, whether it's because of divine intervention or whether or not the lottery is rigged, the Predators, we all know in our hearts, they're never going to get the number 1 pick. But if you knew that a bad season meant the number 1 pick, you would take it. I know it. I'm speaking for everybody when I say that. If I said, hey, because the best the Predators can do is what? That they're all right, and last year was just a minor setback, and this team's going to be healthy, and Yossi's POTS diagnosis doesn't matter, and Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea all play together, and it all works out great, and what they make it to the second round of the playoffs? Maybe. What's more likely is they make the playoffs and get bounced in 6 games against an okay team, like a Colorado. Well, I'd rather take the number 1 pick than that. But there are no guarantees either way. But I look at the Preds, and I did my top 10 prospects earlier today. And Brady Martin's number 1, Tanner Mullendyke's number 2. The third prospect on the list I have is Matthew Wood. Matthew Wood does not profile to be an impact first-line big boy forward. And to get an impact first-line big boy forward, you really do have to be picking in the top 10. Every now and then there's a guy that gets taken in the second round, or there's a David Pasternak that gets taken at the end of the first round who becomes a super stud, but it's really not likely. And let's say Brady Martin is that guy, or Brady Martin is what Trotz really believes he is, and I don't want to get into the Bobby Clark thing because, again, Bobby Clark's going to the Hall of Fame. But let's say this unbelievably motivated, hardworking, intense number 1 center, you put the C on his chest. Jonathan Toews. Don't you need a Patrick Kane to go with him? Look at Edmonton. Edmonton has 2 high picks. Well, they got a lot of high picks, but they've got 2 superstars that they took high in the draft. Leon Draisaitl, number 3, Connor McDavid, number 1. Look at Florida. Alexander Barkov, number 2. And Aaron Ekblad, number 1. And don't even forget about Sam Bennett and the other Matthew Tkachuk high picks that are on that team. So when it comes to the Predators and this thing being a Stanley Cup contending team, I do feel like most of us are like, hey, they're not going to be a cup contender, but I do want it to be better than it was last year. Like, I want it to be better than it was last year. And when we get to October and they drop the puck and I'm going to the games, like, aren't you going to want a season where you know by Christmas it's not over? Like, you at least want something to watch. Yes. But I'm very torn because the big picture would tell me, I think you're going to need another high pick. Colorado won the cup with their high picks. Nathan McKinnon, number 1, and Mikko Rantanen was a high pick in the 2015 draft. Although the Rantanen pick, team screwed up swinging and missing on him. Right now, Vegas has 3 guys, Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, and Noah Hannafin, that were all taken at the top of the same draft. So I'm kind of sitting here thinking to myself, would a horrible season be a bad thing? Would that just be a bad thing for this team, or is that what they really need? A bad season in the first pick, a bad season in the second pick, so that it's Brady Martin and Patrick Kane. And that I don't know. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program. That's 615-737-1025. We'll hit a little potpourri. We'll do that coming up next. It's Stillman & Company, Order 25 the game. Stillman and Company, let's hit a little potpourri here on the program. There was no TD Power Hour today, but a special edition of Talking with TD is coming up at the top of the hour. So you will hear TD break down the Titans coming up here at 5 o'clock. Okay, number one, I want to hit on this. Number one, Nikolai Ehlers has signed a big contract. The winger, he was the top guy on the board out of Winnipeg. I've always liked Nikolai Ehlers. I've never thought he was a huge difference maker, but a 6-year, $51 million, I believe that's 8.5 per year for Nikolai Ehlers to go to the Canes. And I laughed my ass off when it came to his free agency out of Winnipeg, in which the two things he was looking for were, one, nicer weather, and two, a less intense environment. So take me somewhere that's a little bit warmer. He was considering the Capitals and the Hurricanes. And it's not as if North Carolina or DC are incredibly mild in the winter. It's not Florida or Dallas or Vegas, but it's definitely not Winnipeg. So I'll give him his credit there. Number two, I found this story fascinating, and I am not going to assume guilt. But apparently Cleveland Guardians right-hander Luis Ortiz is under investigation by Major League Baseball after a betting integrity firm flagged a pair of pitches that received unusual gambling activity. Sources from the betting integrity firm IC360 sent an alert in June regarding Ortiz, who apparently has been placed on the non-disciplinary paid leave through July 17th. Apparently there were two pitches, a ball on June 15th against Seattle and a hit batsman on June 27th against St. Louis. In both the bottom of the second inning against the Mariners and the top of the third against the Cardinals, Ortiz threw a first pitch slider that was well outside the strike zone. The alert on Ortiz's first pitches were flagged by bets in Ohio, New York, and New Jersey. Betting on the result of first pitches is offered by some sports books, with such wagers commonly referred to as micro bets. So basically what happened was a lot of people started betting that this would be a ball or that this would be a hit batsman, and it all came in 3 different states at one time on one pitch on 2 separate occasions. Kind of sounds like it's guilty.
Did you see the pitches?
I mean, were they just horrendous?
One of them is about 8 feet out of the zone. It was not even remotely close.
My guess is there's probably, again, I don't know, probably some sort of connection where it's like, hey, on pitch 24. We're all going to bet on pitch 24, and on pitch 24, we want you to throw a ball. On pitch 24, we want you to hit the batter. That's my guess. Here's the rule I've got. And I don't care if gambling is legal. So is shooting yourself up with testosterone. But you can't do that and play baseball. I think the rule across all sports should be, if you bet on your sport, you're banned. If you bet on your sport, period, you're banned. Oh, well, that's not fair because betting's legal. I don't care. If you're involved in gambling at all in your sport, you're banned, period. That's how it should be. And finally, Sophie Cunningham has made some headlines. The new flavor of the month in the WNBA, because she is A, hot, and B, protected Caitlin Clark, said when the WNBA announced expansion to Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Detroit, said maybe they should have asked the players about where to go. Instead, they put us in cities we don't want to be in. We'd like to be in Miami. We'd like to be in Nashville. And boy, people in Detroit got mad. People in Cleveland got mad. Tweets from people like Jamel Hill and Cavs owner Dan Gilbert admonishing Sophie Cunningham. You don't understand. Sophie Cunningham has since walked her comments back. This audio is not very good, but it's July 3rd and it's the WNBA, so bear with me.
Okay, first of all, I know the history behind the WNBA. I know that both of those cities have had teams before and they got us where we're at, so I'm thankful for that. All I was really getting at is like Broadway, the off-court lifestyle. And so I think that is really intriguing. I think Miami's intriguing. That's all I was getting at. I'm thankful for what they've done for our history of the sport. I think it'd be fun to kind of get some teams outside the NBA market. I do think there is benefit when you do have an NBA team, but that's all I was getting at. I think people totally misread that situation. I would never speak down upon middle-class, blue-collar working people. That's where I come from. I'm from Missouri. I get I'm in Indiana, and that's kind of why I'm hinting at Broadway sounds fun. Sophie in Miami sounds fun. All I was.
Sophie in Nashville does sound fun. Wink. But let me say this. Don't walk those comments back, Sophie. I mean, do not walk them back. Yeah, if I agree with her. Hey, don't stick a microphone in my face and don't ask me what I think about those 3 cities because I don't want to go to Detroit either. Joe Rexroad is a Detroit lifer. He chose to move to Nashville. When these players hit free agency, does anybody ever say, boy, I'll tell you, I've always dreamed to play in Cleveland? The answer to that is no. And I know that people in Detroit take it very personal. And I know people in Cleveland get very upset when players like Joakim Noah crap on it. But the reality is those places have to have good teams in order to draw players because there is no reason to want to be in Cleveland or no reason to want to be in Detroit as a professional athlete. It's the same as Stephen A. Smith ripping on Memphis. Hey, Memphis, you want a better reputation? Don't be mad at Stephen A. Smith. Make your city better. Sophie, don't feel the pressure. Don't let social media get you like you stand your ground. Again, I'm not mad Nashville didn't get a WNBA team. I don't know when it comes to the WNBA. I don't know if the WNBA is a Caitlin Clark fad that's going to flame out in a couple of years, or if it's the next big thing. I couldn't tell you. All I can tell you is, Sophie Cunningham, you stand for what you believe in. You don't let those people talk down to you. And finally, with this being the holiday season, with this being Independence Day, I've really gotten into war documentaries of late. But the most important war might have been the Revolutionary War that made us a great country. We do a lot of bickering in this country. We do a lot of complaining. We have a lot of different ideology beliefs. But at the end of the day, whether or not I like who the president is, or I like who you voted for, or you like who I voted for, or whatever, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you're American, that's your hometown. So cheers to you, America. Everybody have a very safe and happy and exciting holiday weekend, and we will see you soon. Stillman and Company, a special edition of Talking with TD is next. Stillman and Company, order to the game.